Chapter 1. The perfect life, or so I thought. The sound of sizzling bacon filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. It was early 6:15 a.m., but I'd been up since 5:00, as always. My life ran on schedules. Up before dawn, hit the gym, shower, breakfast with the family, and then straight to the office. The routine was part of me, something I believed built stability. Stability for my wife, Rachel, for our 2 kids, for the life we were building together. I leaned against the counter, coffee mug warm in my hand, watching Rachel move about the kitchen in her loose white robe. Her hair was pulled back lazily, strands of blonde falling over her face, yet she still looked beautiful to me in a way that made my chest tighten. After all these years, I still thought I'd married the most stunning woman alive. "Morning," I said, sipping my coffee. She glanced over her shoulder with a small smile. "Morning, babe. Did you already work out?" "Yeah, arms today," I replied, patting my bicep with a playful grin, trying to keep up with my younger competition. Rachel rolled her eyes, but she laughed softly. "Oh, please, you're in better shape than half the guys in their 20s. Her voice carried that effortless charm I'd always loved. She wasn't the overly affectionate type, but I never doubted her loyalty. She was my partner, my anchor. Just then, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Our daughter, Emily, came bounding into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes still sleepy but full of energy. At 13, she was already growing into a young woman, though to me, she'd always be my little girl. "Dad," she shouted, hugging me around the waist. "Guess what? We have a science project, and my group wants to build a volcano that actually erupts. Can we buy the stuff for it this weekend?" I set my coffee down, smiling as I bent to her level. "Of course we can. We'll make it the best volcano in the whole school." "Yes," she cheered, darting to the table. Moments later, our son, Jake, dragged his feet into the kitchen. At 10, mornings weren't his thing. He plopped into a chair, groaning. "Everything okay, buddy?" I asked, ruffling his hair. He yawned. "I hate Mondays." Rachel slid plates onto the table, her movements quick, practiced. She kissed the top of Jake's head. "You'll survive. You always do." It was a typical morning. Laughter, light complaints about school, my wife managing everything effortlessly. I looked around at them, the family I had worked my whole life to protect and provide for, and felt a swell of pride. I thought I had it all. Halfway through breakfast, the back door creaked open and in walked Mark, my best friend since high school. "Smells good in here," he said, dropping himself into a chair without waiting for an invitation. "Hope you made enough for me, Rachel." I chuckled. "You're unbelievable, man. Do you even feed yourself at your own house?" Mark grinned. "Why would I, when your wife cooks better than anyone I know?" Rachel laughed lightly, shaking her head. "One of these days you'll owe me a year's worth of groceries." It was all familiar. Mark was practically family. He'd been there for me during every major moment, college, my wedding, when Emily was born, when Jake was born. He had keys to our house, could show up anytime, and it never bothered me. That's how much I trusted him. The kids adored him too. Jake perked up as soon as he saw Mark. "Uncle Mark, can you come to my game this weekend?" "Wouldn't miss it," Mark replied, giving him a fist bump. I smiled, sipping my coffee. To me, Mark was like a brother. If I had a second person I could trust with my life, besides Rachel, it was him. Yet, as Rachel set a plate in front of him, I noticed something I hadn't before. A glance. Quick, barely noticeable. She put the plate down. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second longer than normal, and then both of them looked away. I shook it off. People made eye contact all the time. I was probably just imagining things. Breakfast carried on with laughter and jokes. Mark teased me about working too much. Rachel chimed in about how I was married to my office, and I laughed it off, saying, "Someone's got to pay for all this food you keep mooching, Mark." It was easy, comfortable. The life I thought every man dreamed of, beautiful wife, kids who adored me, a best friend always by my side. After dropping the kids off at school, I kissed Rachel on the cheek before heading to work. She smiled, distracted, her eyes darting to her phone on the counter. The screen lit up, a notification flashing, and she quickly turned it face down. "Everything good?" I asked. "Yeah, just a text from my sister," she said casually, brushing it off. I didn't question it. Why would I? She had nothing to hide. At least, that's what I told myself. Work was the usual grind: meetings, paperwork, phone calls. My mind was consumed with deadlines and numbers, not with doubts. But that evening, when I came home, Rachel was on the phone in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. She lowered her voice the second she saw me. "Okay, I'll talk to you later," she whispered before hanging up quickly. "Who was that?" I asked, dropping my briefcase. "Just Emily's teacher," she replied smoothly, slipping her phone into her pocket. "Nothing big. Some update about the science project." "Oh, all right," I said, loosening my tie. She smiled faintly, but it felt strained. That night, after dinner, we sat on the couch watching TV. Mark had stopped by again, beer in hand, cracking jokes. At one point, he leaned back and tossed a cocky remark my way. "You know, man, if you're not careful, I might just steal this family from you. You're gone so much at work, they'll forget who the real dad is." He said it with a smirk, and Rachel laughed too hard. I chuckled too, brushing it off as one of his bad jokes, but something about it lingered. The way Rachel's hand rested just a little too comfortably on the couch cushion close to his leg. The way their laughter felt synchronized. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid, because I had the perfect life, or so I thought. Chapter 2. Strange Shifts. The first time I noticed something different, it was small, so small that most men would have laughed it off. Rachel had always left her phone lying around the house. Kitchen counter, nightstand, coffee table, she never cared. But one evening, while I was flipping through channels in the living room, I heard the faint buzz of her phone on the counter. She was upstairs folding laundry, so, without thinking, I glanced at the screen. It was just a notification, a message preview, but the name was hidden. Only the first letter showed, an M. Before I could read more, Rachel's voice startled me from the stairs. "What are you doing?" I turned, phone still in my hand. "Nothing, it just buzzed. Thought it might be Emily or Jake." She came down quickly, a little too quickly, and snatched the phone from my hand. Her smile was thin, almost forced. "It's nothing important. Work stuff." I chuckled nervously, holding on my hands. "Relax, I wasn't snooping." "I know," she said, softening her voice, though her eyes stayed hard for a second longer. Then she kissed my cheek. "Sorry. Long day. I'm just tired." And just like that, the moment passed, at least on the surface. But something about the way she clutched that phone, like it was a lifeline, lodged itself in my mind. Over the next few weeks, little changes started stacking up like bricks in a wall I didn't want to see. Rachel began working out at odd hours. She'd never been much of a night owl, but suddenly she was slipping out after dinner, gym bag slung over her shoulder. "Since when do you hit the gym at 9:30 at night?" I asked one evening as she tied her sneakers. She flashed a quick smile. "Since I realized I hate the crowds during the day. It's quieter at night." I looked at her, searching for sincerity. "All right, well, don't overdo it." She kissed me quickly and was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door. I tried to picture her running on a treadmill, earphones in, sweat dripping down her forehead. But another image tried to creep in, one I quickly shoved aside. Then came the absences. "I've got errands," she'd say. Or, "I'm meeting a friend for coffee." Harmless explanations, but they always came with vague details. "Which friend?" I asked once casually. She hesitated, just for a moment, then said, "Melissa, you don't know her that well." And I let it go, because that's what I did. I trusted. Mark's visits became more frequent, too. I'd pull into the driveway after a long day at work and see his car already parked there. He'd greet me like nothing was unusual, a beer in hand, laughing with Rachel in the kitchen. "Hey, man," he'd say, clapping me on the back. "Just thought I'd check in, see how things are." Sometimes, he'd be watching TV with Jake, or helping Emily with her homework. Always comfortable, always at home. One Thursday, I came home early, surprising even myself. I walked in and found Mark sitting at the table with Rachel. They were close, leaning in, laughing about something I couldn't hear. When they saw me, Rachel straightened quickly. "Hey, you're early," she said, her tone just a little too bright. Mark grinned like nothing was off. "What? A guy can't come hang out with his favorite people." I laughed, but the sound felt hollow. "You sure you don't have a life of your own, man?" He smirked. "You work too much," so I'm just making sure your family doesn't get lonely. It was a joke. It had to be, but something about the way Rachel's hand lingered near his on the table stuck in my mind. Nights grew quieter between us. In bed, Rachel would roll to her side, her phone still in her hand, screen light glowing against her face as she typed quickly, smiling faintly at whatever was on the screen. "Who are you texting?" I asked one night, my voice careful. She clicked the phone off instantly, placing it on the nightstand. "Just a friend. Go to sleep. You worry too much." And then she turned over, ending the conversation. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest tight. The thought crossed my mind, what if something's going on? But I hated myself for even thinking it. This was Rachel. My Rachel. The woman who had given me children, stood by me for years. She was tired, that was all. Stressed. Maybe she just needed space. That had to be it. One Saturday, I decided to test myself. Rachel said she was heading to the gym again. Instead of sitting home, I grabbed my keys. "Mind if I join you?" I asked with a grin. Her face flickered barely, but I caught it. Then she smiled too quickly. "Actually, I'm meeting a trainer for a one-on-one. It'd be awkward if you were there. Maybe next time." "Oh, sure. Next time," I said, forcing a smile. When she left, I stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the street. I thought about following. The idea scared me. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I wasn't sure I could handle the truth if I found it. The following week, Emily said something that nearly knocked the wind out of me. "Uncle Mark helped Mom fix the sink today," she said at dinner, chewing casually. "He's always here when you're at work." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "Oh, is that right?" Rachel laughed softly, brushing it off. "Mark's just handy, that's all. He offered to help while you were busy." I smiled weakly. "Yeah, he's always been good with tools." But inside, a storm churned. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't I know he was over here today? Still, I said nothing. The doubts came at night, gnawing at me in the silence. Was I being paranoid? Was I overanalyzing every glance, every laugh, every late-night trip out the door? I replayed our mornings, her excuses, Mark's jokes. The phone clutched to her side like it was another limb. The way she seemed to shrink when I asked too many questions. And then I'd scold myself. "You're tired. You're working too hard. You're imagining things. Rachel would never betray you." So I swallowed the unease. I told myself love meant trust, and trust meant giving her the benefit of the doubt. Even as the shadows lengthened around me. Even as the laughter between them felt sharper, secretive. Even as my gut screamed louder every day. I brushed it off. Convinced myself she was just stressed. Convinced myself I wasn't the kind of man who got paranoid. Because that was easier than facing the alternative. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Foundation. The first thing to change was the silence. Rachel had always been the one to laugh the loudest, to fill our home with warmth. Even when we were tired, even when money was tight in the early years, she had a way of climbing into my arms at night and reminding me that we were in it together. But now, nights had grown cold, literally. She turned her back to me in bed, curling up tight, like a fortress. The once effortless closeness felt forced whenever I tried to bridge the gap. One night, I slid closer, my hand resting gently on her hip. "Hey," I whispered, kissing her shoulder. She stiffened, not even turning her head. "I'm exhausted. Can we not tonight?" My chest sank. "Of course. Sorry." I rolled to my side, staring into the dark. My mind whispered cruel things. "She doesn't want you anymore. Someone else makes her feel alive." I clenched my jaw and forced those thoughts away. She was tired. She'd been working out late, keeping busy. Maybe I just needed to give her space. But when space becomes the routine, you start to feel like a ghost in your own marriage. The defensiveness came next. One evening after dinner, I casually asked, "So, did you end up meeting Melissa again today?" Her fork paused halfway to her lips. She glanced up sharply. "Why?" I frowned. "Just asking. Trying to keep up with your busy schedule." Her eyes narrowed. "What, you keeping tabs on me now?" "No," I said quickly, caught off guard by the sharpness in her voice. "I'm just interested. That's all." She set her fork down with a clatter. "You don't trust me, do you?" I stared at her. "Rachel, I didn't say that." Her voice rose. "It feels like it. Every time I go somewhere, you're asking questions." I I can't even breathe without you acting suspicious. My stomach churned. I hated fighting with her, especially in front of the kids, who sat quietly, eyes wide. I lowered my tone. I didn't mean it like that. I just want to know what's going on in your life. Isn't that what husbands do? She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. Sometimes it feels like you don't trust me at all. And that's insulting. Silence stretched across the table. Finally, I nodded. All right, I'll stop asking so much. Her shoulders eased, but the look she gave me was unreadable. A wall had gone up between us, and I didn't know how to climb it. The kids, bless them, didn't realize the weight of their words. They were innocent, honest to a fault. One Saturday morning, while I was repairing a loose cabinet door in the kitchen, Emily plopped down beside me with a juice box in hand. You know, Dad, Uncle Mark's way faster at fixing stuff than you are, she said cheerfully. He helped Mom fix the leaky faucet last week. I froze, screwdriver in hand. Oh, did he now? Yeah, he's always helping Mom when you're at work. Like when the Wi-Fi wasn't working. He fixed that too. She sipped her juice and added with a grin. Mom says Uncle Mark's like our handyman. Something cracked inside me, though I kept my face calm. Well, Uncle Mark's good at that kind of stuff, I said evenly. Emily shrugged. I guess, but you're good at other things. Like science projects. She giggled, then skipped off, leaving me alone with the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Later that evening, as Rachel cleared the table, I couldn't stop myself. Why didn't you tell me Mark's been fixing things around here? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She stiffened, not looking at me. Because it's not a big deal. It is to me. I'm your husband. If something breaks, I should be the one you ask. She whirled around, eyes flashing. Oh, so now I can't accept help from friend? Do you hear how controlling you sound? I blinked, stunned. Controlling? Rachel, all I'm saying is, you didn't tell me. That's all. Doesn't it seem a little odd? Her voice sharpened. What's odd is that you think every little thing has some hidden meaning. Mark is your best friend. He's like family. And you're accusing me of what, exactly? Sneaking around behind your back. The word hung heavy between us, though I hadn't spoken it. My chest tightened, a knot of pain and anger and confusion. No, I'm not accusing. I want to feel like I'm enough for you. Her expression softened for half a second, just a second, before hardening again. You are enough. But the way you're acting, it's pushing me away. I wanted to argue. I wanted to shout that she was the one pushing me away, that the distance wasn't in my head. But the fear of losing her, of breaking us completely, silenced me. I swallowed hard. All right, maybe I'm overthinking things. She sighed, picking up a dish. Yes, you are. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Rachel slept with her back to me. I thought about all the little moments piling up like bricks. The late-night workouts. The phone glued to her hand. The way Mark seemed to always appear when I wasn't around. And now, even my children's innocent words twisted in my chest like knives. Uncle Mark always helps Mom when you're not around. Was it all just coincidence? Was I letting paranoia eat me alive? Or was there something real behind the cracks I could no longer ignore? I reached out, brushing my hand gently against Rachel's back. She shifted away, murmuring in her sleep. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to believe her words. You're enough. You're overthinking. You're pushing me away. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was the problem. And so, despite the storm brewing in my chest, I buried my doubts, clinging to the only thing that had kept me steady all these years. My loyalty to her. Even as the cracks in our foundation deepened, I told myself love would hold us together. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. It was nearly midnight when I finally turned off the TV. The house was quiet, the kids long asleep, and Rachel had gone upstairs an hour earlier. My bones ached with exhaustion after a long week at work, and all I wanted was the comfort of sleep beside my wife. I climbed the stairs quietly, but as I reached the landing, faint laughter drifted up from the kitchen. I frowned. The light was on. Rachel. I glanced at our bedroom door. It was open, the bed empty. She was downstairs. Curious, I patted back down the steps, bare feet silent against the wood. I intended to tell her to come to bed, maybe even surprise her with a hug. But when I reached the bottom, I froze. It wasn't just Rachel's voice. Mark was there too. I peered through the narrow gap of the hallway into the kitchen. They were sitting close at the table, half-empty wine glasses in front of them. Rachel's laugh, low and intimate, cut through me. I should have walked in, announced myself, but something held me still. Something in the way they leaned toward each other. Their voices hushed like co-conspirators. My chest tightened, a storm already brewing. Then I heard it. Rachel, her tone playful. "It's crazy, isn't it? He trusts us with everything. The house, the kids, even you." Mark chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "That loser has no idea. 19 years, Rachel. 19 years, and he's still completely oblivious." My stomach dropped. My breath caught in my throat. 19 years? Rachel smirked, swirling her wine. "Sometimes I almost feel guilty." "Almost." "Don't," Mark said with a cocky grin. "He's too busy working himself into the ground to notice. And if he ever did, what's he gonna do? Cry? Walk out? Please. He doesn't have it in him." I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles whitened. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might break my ribs. Rachel leaned in, her voice lowering, but I caught every word. "You know what makes it worse? He actually thinks Jake and Emily are his." The room spun. I staggered back against the wall, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle the sound that threatened to escape. "They're mine," Mark said proudly, almost smug. "Both of them. And he doesn't have a clue." Rachel laughed again, cruel this time. "You should see his face when the kids talk about you. He thinks it's just Uncle Mark being the fun one. If only he knew." I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm in and tear the room apart, demand answers, shake the truth out of them. My entire body trembled, rage and grief tearing through me in equal measure. But I couldn't move. My legs were rooted to the spot, as if the weight of their betrayal had pinned me down. Mark poured more wine, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Sometimes I wonder if he even cares. He's so damn oblivious. It's almost pathetic." Rachel's eyes gleamed. "Pathetic maybe, but useful. He pays the bills, keeps the roof over our heads, makes sure the kids, your kids, have everything they need. Why would I ever give that up?" That was it. The knife twisted deep. Not only had they betrayed me, they had built their lives on my sacrifice. Every late night at the office, every dollar earned, every drop of sweat I had poured into providing for my family, it was all for them. For a lie. I pressed my fist against my mouth, my body shaking violently. My vision blurred with tears I couldn't stop. I wanted to hate her, hate him, but what I felt was worse. A hollow, consuming grief, as though the life I'd built had been burned to ash right before my eyes. Rachel reached across the table, her fingers brushing Mark's hand. The intimacy of it made bile rise in my throat. "Do you ever think about telling him?" she asked softly. Mark scoffed. "And ruin this? Hell no. Let him keep playing husband. Let him keep slaving away. The longer he stays blind, the better for us." Their laughter rang out again. Cruel, mocking, and something inside me broke. I stumbled back up the stairs as quietly as I could, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the railing to keep from falling. Every step felt like dragging chains behind me. When I reached our bedroom, I collapsed onto my side of the bed, my chest heaving. My body shook uncontrollably, hands pressed against my face, muffling the sob that tore its way out of me. How long? How many years had I been living a lie? Every birthday, every holiday, every smile from my children, were they never really mine? Was my whole life nothing but a cruel joke? The ceiling blurred above me as tears streamed unchecked. Rage and sorrow tangled into something unrecognizable, something that left me hollow and shaking. Downstairs, I heard their voices still, their laughter, their whispers, the sound of glasses clinking. I curled onto my side, biting down hard on my knuckle to keep from screaming. If they came up now, they couldn't know I had heard. I couldn't let them see me broken. Not yet. So I lay there in the darkness, pretending to sleep. My heart, my soul, my entire world shattered in silence. Chapter 5. The Silent Storm. The morning after I heard the truth, I woke to Rachel's gentle stirring beside me. Her alarm buzzed. She silenced it and rolled out of bed with a yawn. I lay still, eyes closed, my breathing steady, pretending to sleep, the same way I had pretended the night before. She padded across the room, humming faintly as if nothing had happened. She didn't know her words still echoed in my skull, a blade twisting deeper with every breath. He trusts us with everything. He thinks the kids are his. He's pathetic. My stomach turned. I forced myself up an hour later, moving like a man underwater. When I came down to the kitchen, Rachel was at the stove flipping pancakes. She smiled over her shoulder. "Morning, babe." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Morning, babe," as though she hadn't shredded my world less than 12 hours earlier. "Morning," I croaked, sliding into my chair. Emily was already at the table, scribbling in her notebook. Jake shoveled cereal into his mouth, milk dripping down his chin. "Dad, we're doing that volcano project today, right?" Emily asked. I forced a smile. "Of course. We'll make it erupt better than anyone else's." They cheered. Rachel laughed softly, as if our life was untouched, untainted. And I realized something then. The show must go on. For them. For now. So I put on a mask. The mask stayed with me all week. At work, I buried myself in meetings, nodding at colleagues while my thoughts replayed that night in the kitchen on a loop. I imagined smashing the wine glasses out of their hands, screaming at them until the walls shook. But then I pictured Emily's innocent face, Jake's wide eyes. They had no idea. To them, I was still Dad. And so I smiled. But at home, the mask was heavier. I watched everything differently now, with sharpened eyes. Mark dropped by Tuesday evening. He strolled in casually, as though he owned the place, tossing his jacket over a chair. "Got any beer?" "Fridge," I muttered, pretending to focus on my laptop. Rachel's face lit up when she saw him. That glow, that warmth, I had mistaken it for friendliness for years. Now I saw it for what it was. They laughed too easily, stood too close. When Rachel brushed past him, her hand lingered a second longer than it should. When he whispered something in her ear, she swatted his arm with mock annoyance, her eyes shining. And me? I sat there, invisible. How long has it been like this? I asked myself. Was I blind all these years? Were my children's first steps celebrated in secret by him, too? Did she whisper to him about my promotions, my late nights, my weaknesses? Every memory I had of them twisted into something ugly, poisoned by the truth. One evening, as Rachel washed dishes, I stepped behind her. My hand touched her waist, not out of desire, but out of need to see how she'd react. She stiffened, just slightly. "Enough. You okay?" I asked softly. "I'm fine," she said quickly, not turning. "Just tired. Tired. Always tired." I wanted to scream. "Tired of me, you mean? Tired of the lie." Instead, I kissed her temple and whispered, "I love you." She froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Love you too." The words hit me like a slap. They were hollow now, empty. At night, while she slept, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, fury and grief coiled inside me like snakes. My mind ran through possibilities. Confront her? Tear the truth out? No. Too easy. Too merciful. Confront him? Risk a fight that might end with my children waking to screams? No. No. I needed something better. Something permanent. Revenge. The word tasted bitter but satisfying on my tongue. If Rachel and Mark had built their little world on my back, I would tear it down, brick by brick, until they stood in the ruins. But to do that, I had to be careful. Strategic. I had to play the part of the oblivious husband just a little longer. So the mask stayed on. The children, unknowingly, twisted the knife deeper with their innocent comments. "Uncle Mark always helps Mom when you're busy," Jake chirped one evening, bouncing a basketball against the garage wall. I forced a smile. "Yeah, he's good like that. He said he's going to teach me how to throw a curveball." Jake grinned proudly. I nodded, my heart breaking. "Of course he is, because he thinks you're his son." Later that night, Emily asked, "Dad, why don't you hang out with Uncle Mark more? He's so much fun. You two used to do everything together." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. "We just grew up, that's all. People get busy." Her face scrunched in confusion. "But you're best friends." The words echoed in my skull like a cruel joke. Best friends. Rachel grew bolder in her secrecy, or maybe I was just seeing clearly now. Her phone always locked. Her gym sessions longer. her mood swings sharper. One Friday night, she slipped into bed smelling faintly of cologne, not mine. I rolled to my side, forcing steady breaths, pretending to sleep. Inside, my blood boiled. I imagined standing, tearing the covers off, demanding the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. Because rage without control is chaos. And chaos wasn't what I wanted. I wanted destruction, precise, deliberate destruction. The house felt different now. Every room was haunted by whispers. The kitchen, where they mocked me. The living room, where they laughed behind my back. The bed, where she turned away from me while maybe dreaming of him. But I played my role. I laughed with the kids, mowed the lawn, paid the bills. To Rachel, I was still her steady husband. To Mark, I was still the oblivious fool. They had no idea the storm was brewing inside me. The storm of a man betrayed, humiliated, stripped of everything he thought he was. And storms, once unleashed, destroy everything in their path. Chapter 6. The betrayal confirmed. The storm inside me had sharpened into something colder. Anger was still there, burning, but rage without proof is just noise. I needed facts. I needed certainty. If Rachel and Mark thought I was blind, then blindness would be my weapon. Let them keep believing I was the fool. I would use it to tear everything apart. So I began watching, listening, collecting. It started with the phone bills. Rachel always brushed me off when I asked about them, said she handled the accounts, that there was no need for me to worry. But one evening, while she showered, I logged into our provider's website. The numbers jumped out at me immediately. Marks, over and over. Late at night, sometimes for an hour, sometimes two. Texts at dawn, calls during her workouts, and long silences from her end when she'd been busy. I printed the logs and slipped them into a folder I'd hidden in the garage, beneath a box of old tools. My hands shook as I did it, but not from uncertainty. From clarity. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining shadows. The shadows were real, and they had names. But it wasn't enough. So I listened. Rachel had grown careless, maybe too comfortable in her lies. She'd step into the backyard to take a call, speaking in hushed tones, pacing the patio. She'd laugh, a laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. A girlish, flirty laugh. Once, I heard her whisper, "I can't talk long. He's here." And I nearly broke through the sliding glass door right then. But I clenched my fists and waited. Not yet. The cracks spread wider when I paid closer attention to the people around us. One Saturday, we had dinner with Rachel's parents. Her mother smiled tightly at me across the table, but when Rachel excused herself to take a call, her father cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably. "You've been working a lot these days," he said. "Yeah," I answered. "Gotta keep the family secure." He nodded but couldn't meet my eyes. His wife reached under the table and squeezed his hand. That squeeze told me everything. They knew. Her parents, people I had respected, people who had toasted us at our wedding, people who had embraced me like a son, knew. And they said nothing. The realization came in waves after that. At my sister's barbecue, Mark joked loudly about being part of the family. Everyone laughed, but I noticed how my sister's smile faltered when she glanced at me. Like she pitied me. Pity. That night, I cornered her in the kitchen. "You ever notice Rachel and Mark being close?" She froze, eyes darting away. "Why would you ask that?" "Just curious." She forced a laugh. "No, of course not. Don't be silly." But her voice cracked on the word silly. And I knew. She knew. Even my so-called friends betrayed me with their silence. One of the guys from work, Eric, clapped me on the back during happy hour. "Man, you've got it all figured out. Wife, kids, best buddy always by your side." Some guys have all the luck. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. His tone carried something else, something mocking. I stared into my beer, feeling my skin crawl. Had they all been laughing at me this whole time? Watching me brag about my family vacations, my faithful wife, my loyal friend, while behind their eyes they whispered the truth I never saw. The humiliation ate at me more than the betrayal itself. Not only had I been deceived, but I had been made into a joke, a clown in my own life. The weight grew heavier with every new piece of evidence, every awkward glance, every forced smile. My heart no longer ached, it calcified. At night, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. 19 years. 19 years of marriage, 2 children, countless sacrifices, and all of it built on lies. Rachel had taken my devotion and used it as her alibi. Mark had taken my friendship and twisted it into his ticket inside my home. And everyone else, her parents, my sister, my friends, had seen the truth and chosen silence. Not one person had respected me enough to tell me. Not one person had believed I deserved the truth. That was the deepest cut. One evening, while Rachel folded laundry, I tested her. "Hey," I said casually, "you talked to Mark today?" Her hands paused mid-fold. No." "What?" I shrugged. "Just asking." She forced a smile. "You're so paranoid sometimes." The word rang in my head. Paranoid. That's what liars say to keep you doubting yourself. I grinned back, hiding the venom boiling in my chest. "Yeah, maybe I am." Inside, I whispered to myself, "Not anymore." I became an actor in my own home. I kissed Rachel's cheek before work. I helped Emily with homework. I tossed the ball with Jake. I even drank a beer with Mark in the backyard, nodding along to his jokes while imagining smashing the bottle across his smug face. They thought they still had me. They thought I was the same man, trusting, loyal, blind. But the truth had changed me. I wasn't blind anymore. I wasn't theirs anymore. Every mask I wore, every smile I faked, hardened my resolve. This wasn't just about Rachel and Mark anymore. It was bigger. It was about all of them. The ones who knew, the ones who looked away, the ones who let me carry the weight of a lie while they stood by. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I'd keep playing my role forever. But I wasn't going to confront them in anger. I wasn't going to scream, cry, or beg. That would make me the fool again. No, I would build my revenge carefully, patiently, the same way they built their web of lies. Brick by brick, and when the time came, they would all watch it collapse. Not just Rachel, not just Mark, everyone who betrayed me, everyone who stayed silent, everyone who treated me like the blind fool in my own life. I would tear it all down, and I would make them choke on the ruins. Chapter 7. The Vanishing Act. Morning came, and with it, a strange calm. I had spent the night in silence, staring at the ceiling while Rachel slept beside me. She shifted occasionally, mumbling in her dreams, unaware that everything she thought she controlled was about to collapse. For 19 years, I had lived for this family. Today, I would bury it. The plan had been forming in my head for days, maybe even weeks. Revenge doesn't need rage, it needs precision. And I was ready. When the alarm went off at 6:30, Rachel groaned and rolled over. "You getting up?" "Yeah," I said, sliding out of bed. Big day at work. Big day indeed. By 8 a.m., I was at the bank. The teller greeted me with her usual polite smile. "Good morning, Mr. Collins. What can I do for you today?" I slid my ID across the counter. "I want to close our joint account. Transfer everything into my personal account." She hesitated. "Joint accounts require, not this one." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I'm the primary on the account. You can check the paperwork. She's only a secondary. All I need is my signature." She tapped the keyboard, checked, and her expression shifted. "You're correct, sir." I nodded once. "Then do it." Half an hour later, the fund were mine. Every cent college savings. Rainy day fund. Emergency stash. Gone from her reach. The next stop was the lawyer's office. I had already contacted him days earlier, quietly, preparing everything I needed. Divorce papers. Property transfers. Updates to my will. "Mr. Collins," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Everything's set. All it needs is your signature." I flipped through the documents. Cold, legal words that would slice through the life I'd built. On one page, I paused. The inheritance clause. I picked up the pen and pressed it hard against the paper, crossing out the names I had written 19 years ago. Emily. Jacob. Not mine. Never mind. The ink bled under my grip, a black scar across their names. I added a note in bold letters. All assets to be distributed to charity upon death. My lawyer glanced at me. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. Children, not mine." I cut him off, my voice like glass. He didn't press further, just nodded. "Understood." I signed the rest of the documents, every stroke of the pen severing me from the life I had been forced to play. By noon, I was at the real estate office. The house, our house, the place I had painted, fixed, repaired, and loved was already under my name alone. Rachel never cared about paperwork, never bothered to notice where her signature was missing. A young realtor smiled brightly. "Mr. Collins, are you sure you want to move so quickly? A house like this, sell it," I said. "Fast. Cash offer if possible. I don't care about profit. Just get it gone." She blinked, startled by my bluntness, but nodded. "We can list it today." "Do it." By the time I drove home, the sun was sinking. Rachel was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred pasta. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, you're home early." I smiled back. "Yeah, figured I'd surprise you." It was almost funny, her face, so casual, so certain she was safe in her lies. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was already gone. After dinner, she scrolled through her phone while I sat across from her, pretending to read the paper. My heart was steady. My hands were calm. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. Later that night, when she showered, I placed a thick envelope on the dining table. Divorce papers, legal notices, bank statements confirming the emptied accounts, the revised will, and on top of it all, the note. I had written it earlier, every word carved out of me like stone. "Congratulations. You finally get to live openly with him. The only thing you won't have is me or what I built. The house, the money, the security, it's all gone. Enjoy each other. You've earned it." I read it twice before setting it down, making sure the words cut sharp enough to bleed. When Rachel finally came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, she found me lying in bed with my back turned. "Night," she said softly. I didn't answer. Sleep never came, but it didn't matter. At 4 a.m., I got dressed quietly, packed the last of my things into a duffel bag, and walked through the dark house one final time. The living room where the kids had taken their first steps. The backyard where Mark and I had grilled burgers, laughing like brothers. The bedroom where Rachel had once looked at me like I was her whole world. All of it a lie. I left the keys on the counter next to the envelope. The sky was still black when I drove away, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it disappeared. I didn't look back. Not once. I wasn't the man who lived there anymore. I wasn't her husband. I wasn't their father. I was no one, and that was my power. At 7:30, Rachel would come downstairs, still groggy, still wrapped in the illusion that her life was secure. She would see the envelope. Her hands would tremble as she opened it, her eyes widening, her voice cracking as she called for me. She would scream my name. She would call my phone. She would call Mark, and neither of them would find me. By the time they realized what I had done, by the time they grasped the full weight of what they had lost, I would already be gone, vanished, leaving nothing but ashes of a life they thought they owned. Chapter 8. 5 years in the shadows. When I vanished, I didn't just disappear from them. I disappeared from myself. The first months were the hardest. Waking up in a cheap motel room in a town where nobody knew my name. Eating greasy takeout in silence. Staring at blank walls, my phone off, my old life cut off like a severed limb. I was alive but hollow. But hollow men can rebuild. At first, I worked odd jobs, anything to keep me moving and out of my head. Construction sites. Late-night janitorial shifts. Hauling crates at a warehouse. I kept my head down, cash in hand, no questions asked. But I had something most of those men didn't have. Skills. Years of working in project management, finance, and logistics. I knew how to build, how to organize, how to make money flow. One evening, in a diner in Arizona, a man named Victor slid into the booth across from me. I'd helped him out earlier that week, fixing a mess at his small shipping company. "You're wasted doing grunt work," he said, stirring his coffee. "I need a man like you. What makes you think I'm looking for anything?" I asked. He smirked. "Because men who stare out windows with eyes like yours aren't running from poverty. They're running from something worse." I didn't answer, but I took his card. That card was the doorway to my new life. Within a year, I was running operations for Victor's company, streamlining routes, cutting losses, expanding clients. Money followed. Respect followed. I didn't stop there. I invested quietly. Stocks, real estate, a few risky ventures that paid off. By the second year, I wasn't scraping by anymore. I was thriving. But every dollar I earned, every deal I made, every late night staring at spreadsheets, it all carried the same fuel. Rage. Rage at Rachel's laugh echoing in my ears when she thought I was asleep. Rage at Mark's smug tone, bragging about being the real father of the children I raised. Rage at the silence of every friend, every family member who let me live blind in my own home. People thought I was just ambitious, a man with fire in his belly. They didn't know that fire was burning me alive. I tried, God knows I tried, to let it go. I dated a little half-heartedly. A woman named Claire, a bartender with kind eyes, once asked me, "What happened to you?" We were sitting in her apartment, the city lights glowing through the window. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You look like a man who's here," she said, touching my chest, "but not here." I kissed her to avoid answering. She deserved someone whole. I wasn't him. 5 years is a long time. Long enough for wounds to scab over, but not long enough for scars to fade. Every night, when the world went quiet, I replayed it all. The whispered phone calls, the sudden coldness in Rachel's touch, the children's innocent comments about Uncle Mark helping Mommy, the way Mark grinned across the dinner table, sitting in my seat without sitting in it. It never left me. It sharpened me. I became disciplined. Gym every morning at 5.00. Miles of running, iron in my hands, sweat on my skin. A body hardened not for vanity, but for survival. I read, too. Psychology, business warfare, books on betrayal, loyalty, revenge. Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, even case studies of men ruined by infidelity. I dissected them, learning what made some collapse and others rise stronger. I swore to myself I would never be the man who collapsed. By year 3, I owned 2 properties, 3 businesses, and enough assets to walk into any room with weight. But wealth wasn't my endgame. It was a weapon. Because somewhere in the shadows of my planning, a seed had been growing. The final piece. I won't lie. I fantasized about different endings. Some nights, I imagined walking up to their house with a gun. Other nights, I pictured walking into Rachel's workplace and destroying her reputation. But those were the weak fantasies of a wounded man. The real me, the man forged in these 5 years, wanted something bigger. Not blood, not scandal, but annihilation. The kind that stripped them bare in front of everyone. One rainy night, sitting in my office, I caught my reflection in the glass. A stranger looked back at me. Stronger, sharper, colder. "You're not his friend anymore," I muttered. "You're not her husband. You're not their fool." I raised my glass of whiskey in a mock toast. "You're the storm they never saw coming." People began asking me about my past. Business partners, women, acquaintances. "Where are you from?" "Got family back home." I always gave the same answer, with a slight smile. No one worth mentioning. It was true now. Rachel, Mark, the kids, they were ghosts to me. But ghosts don't stay buried forever. By the 5th year, I had everything I needed. Money, power, connections, and most importantly, patience. Revenge isn't a quick blade, it's a slow poison. And I had spent 5 years distilling mine into perfection. I had files, photos, conversations overheard before I vanished, legal records, proof of their lies, their manipulation, their betrayal. And with every piece, the plan grew sharper. But in the quiet moments, when I lay in my penthouse bed or stared at the ceiling of my office, I asked myself one question. Why? Why had I loved her so blindly? Why had I trusted him so completely? Why had I lived 19 years in a life built on sand? The answer always came the same. Because I was loyal. Because I believed in honor, in sacrifice, in love. And they had taken that man, me, and gutted him alive. Now, they would meet the man who rose from those ashes. As the 5th year closed, I stood in front of the mirror again. A tailored suit, a body like carved stone, eyes that no longer belonged to a trusting fool, but to a predator. The final piece was ready. I smiled, a cold, deliberate smile. Time to go home. Chapter 9. The Return. 5 years had turned me into a ghost in their world. But now I was no ghost. I was flesh, bone, and fury wrapped in polished steel. I drove back into town in a car that gleamed like midnight, tailored suit pressed against my frame, wristwatch glinting under the sun. People looked twice when I walked by. They didn't recognize me at first. Why would they? The man who had left was broken, hollow, invisible. The man who returned radiated power, and it was time for them to see it. Rachel and Mark hadn't fared so well. I had kept quiet tabs on them through subtle connections, never close enough to be detected, but always near enough to know the truth. Their house had been foreclosed. They were renting a cramped place now. Rachel's once perfect hair was dull, her skin tired, weighed down by stress and years of pretending to be happy. Mark had gained weight, his cocky grin now buried under bills and unpaid debts. His kids, resented them. Teenagers now, angry and bitter at the instability, at the broken promises. The family that had betrayed me was no longer the image of perfection. They were fragments, and I was about to shatter what little remained. The opportunity came in the form of a family gathering. Rachel's mother was turning 60. They rented out a hall. Everyone was invited. Cousins, siblings, uncles, aunts, the entire network of people who had once smiled in my face while stabbing me in the back. Perfect. I walked into that hall with the quiet authority of a man who owned the ground he stepped on. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Forks clattered against plates. Rachel's fork dropped too. Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Mark turned slowly, his face blanching before he forced on that old smug smirk. "Well, look who decided to crawl out of hiding." "Not hiding," I said calmly, buttoning my jacket. "Building." The room was suffocatingly silent. My eyes scanned every face, my so-called family, my so-called friends. Guilt hung heavy in their eyes. They all knew what they had done. "Why are you here?" Rachel finally managed, her voice shaky, eyes darting everywhere but me. "I'm here," I said, walking further in, "because it's long past time we had some truth." I could feel the tension thicken. Whispers rippled across the tables. Rachel's father shifted uncomfortably. Her mother clasped her hands tighter in her lap. My own brother stared at the floor. "Cowards, all of them." Mark chuckled, tried to control the room with bravado. "Truth? Please. You left, man. You couldn't handle real life, so you ran away. And now you come back dressed like some wannabe king? For what? To get applause?" I tilted my head, smiling coldly. "No, I came back to bury lies." I pulled a sleek folder from my briefcase and dropped it on the nearest table with a sharp thud. The sound echoed through the hall. Rachel's face went pale. "These," I said, tapping the folder, "are copies of phone records, messages, photographs, even bank statements. Every shred of evidence I collected before I walked away. Evidence of your affair. Evidence of her deception. Evidence that while I worked myself to the bone for this family, you two were busy mocking me in my own kitchen." Gasps spread around the room. Rachel shot to her feet, panic flashing in her eyes. Those aren't what they look like, don't." My voice cut through hers like a blade. "I heard you. I heard you both. I remember every word you whispered when you thought I was asleep." Mark raised his chin, defiance in his tone. "So what? So we loved each other. You think you can stand here and play the victim? You were blind, man. Blind and weak. I gave her what you couldn't." I leaned forward, my voice low, controlled, dangerous. "You gave her nothing but shame. You gave her children I raised as my own while you laughed behind my back. You gave her the life of a parasite, feeding off what I built, what I sacrificed, until I took it all away." Rachel's tears finally spilled. She clutched the edge of the table. "Please don't do this here. Not in front of everyone." "Oh, Rachel," I said softly, almost kindly. "That's exactly why I'm doing this here. Because every single one of them," I gestured at the sea of faces, "knew. They smiled at me, shook my hand, ate at my table, and knew. And not one of them had the decency to tell me." The silence was deafening. Not one person denied it. I laughed bitterly. "Family, friends, all of you watched me live a lie. All of you let me raise children that weren't mine. You let me bleed for a dream while you protected them." Rachel's mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. We thought it was best. You thought wrong." I snapped, the anger I had buried for years cutting loose. "You thought it was better to let me rot in ignorance, to make me the fool. And you succeeded. But the fool isn't standing here anymore. Mark slammed his fist on the table. You think you're better than us now? You think coming back with your fancy suit and your money makes you the hero? You're nothing, man. Nothing. I stepped closer, towering over him. If I'm nothing, then what does that make you? A leech who couldn't provide. A coward who hid behind lies. A man so desperate he stole from the one person who trusted him the most. Look around, Mark. Look at what you've got left. His kids glared at him, faces filled with disgust. Even Rachel flinched at my words. Rachel tried again, voice breaking. We made mistakes, but we loved love. I barked out a cold laugh. Don't you dare use that word. Love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't stand in my kitchen, whispering that the children calling me dad belong to another man. Her knees gave out, and she sank in her chair, sobbing. I straightened, scanning the hall one last time. I'm not here for apologies. I don't want them. I don't need them. I came back to give you all a gift, the truth you try to bury. And now it's out. No more pretending. No more lies. Mark's jaw clenched. Rachel wept, and the room sat in silence, the weight of my words pressing down on every soul present. I turned toward the door, my voice low, steady, final. Congratulations. You finally get to live openly with him. The only thing you won't have is me, or what I built. And with that, I walked out, leaving them in ruins. Chapter 10. The final lesson. The day after the confrontation, the air in town felt different. I moved through it as a shadow wrapped in confidence. People whispered, glanced, stared, but no one dared approach me. I had given Rachel and Mark the truth. I had exposed them. I had torn their carefully constructed life apart in front of the people who had silently enabled their lies. And yet, I owed them nothing. Nothing. The first order of business was legal. While I had left them financially crippled 5 years ago, I wanted to ensure they could never crawl back. I contacted the attorney I had kept throughout my time away. Everything we did last time, I said over the phone, voice calm and deliberate, needs finality. I want liens, judgments, everything in place that makes it impossible for them to recover. Let them have no assets, no home, no foothold in this town. Leave them with humiliation and nothing else. Understood, the lawyer replied. I'll handle it. You want this public or quiet? Quiet, I said, a smile curling under my lips. The humiliation is already public. This is just the final confirmation. By mid-afternoon, Rachel and Mark received the notices. Legal documents stating foreclosure, wage garnishments, dissolved rights, and property transfers, every avenue sealed. I had done my due diligence years ago, building every escape route, every contingency while I was in the shadows. Now, every one of those plans crystallized into irreversible ruin. I watched from a distance as their world crumbled again, even after the public humiliation the night before. The look on Rachel's face, a mixture of panic, regret, and disbelief, was nearly cinematic. Mark tried to bluff, but the color had drained from his face. Their children, now old enough to recognize betrayal firsthand, simply shook their heads. They understood, silently, that the adults who had built their lives on lies were gone, and what remained was unfixable. I could have confronted them again. I could have made a speech, delivered a final lecture, made them grovel. But the greatest power isn't in shouting, it's in walking away. I decided to visit the house one last time, now a hollow shell, devoid of warmth and laughter. The windows were cracked, the lawn overgrown. I ran my hand over the doorframe, remembering birthdays, Christmas mornings, and quiet nights by the fire, scenes that had once been mine in all sincerity. Funny, isn't it? I murmured to myself, voice low, almost tender. How life can feel perfect until it's hollow. How loyalty can be met with betrayal. And how the strongest man is the one who stands and leaves with nothing to prove but his own dignity. I walked through the empty rooms, letting my gaze linger on the faded wallpaper, the remnants of toys in the corners. There was no anger now, only clarity. Rage had served its purpose. It had sharpened me, motivated me, taught me to build myself anew. But it was finished. What remained was serenity. I paused in the living room, imagining Rachel rushing through the front door, yelling, screaming, begging. I smiled softly. She didn't need to see me to feel the weight of what I had done. The destruction wasn't just in my presence, it was in my absence. That was the point. Later, I met my lawyer for a final discussion. "All documents are filed," he said, handing me the thick folder. "Everything you planned is now legally enforceable. There's nothing more you need to do." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you. That's all I needed." He hesitated, as if expecting a question or a further order. I gave him a slight smile. "There's nothing more. Sometimes justice isn't about spectacle. Sometimes the quiet, inevitable collapse is the most satisfying." Walking back to my car, I reflected on the years of deception, the years I'd spent in the shadows, building myself up from the ashes of betrayal. I realized then that the world had tried to define me by what I had lost, but I had redefined myself. I had learned that loyalty can be a weapon if wielded wisely, that betrayal can be a teacher if you survive it, and that the mind sharpened by years of strategy is mightier than any impulse-fueled revenge. I thought about love, the kind I had given freely, the kind I had believed in blindly. I thought about loyalty, the kind that had cost me everything. And I thought about justice, the kind that does not scream, does not rage, does not demand recognition. Justice whispers. It waits. It lands when you are ready. At a small cafe that evening, I sat alone, sipping black coffee and watching people move about their lives. They had no idea who I was or what had unfolded in this town over the last 24 hours. And that was perfect. Anonymity, after all, is the final luxury of the triumphant. A man approached the table next to mine, struggling with a laptop bag. I caught his eye and offered a polite nod. He smiled back, oblivious. I returned to my thoughts, realizing that the most powerful thing I could do now was to exist without attachment, without expectation, without need. The past had been brutal, but the future, mine, was entirely mine. I thought briefly of Rachel and Mark, alone in their apartment, walls closing in around them. Every friend who had laughed at me, every family member who had stayed silent, everyone who had taken pleasure in my humiliation, they too would carry the weight of knowing they had failed me. And I felt nothing. Indifference. That, I realized, was the ultimate victory. Fury and vengeance had their place, but indifference, cold, calm, deliberate, was untouchable. It was freedom. At sunset, I walked along the edge of the lake, water catching the last orange light of the day. Reflections rippled on the surface like fractured memories. I imagined 19 years flashing behind me, the betrayals, the laughter, the whispers, the plans, the exile, the rise. Every scar, every wound, every sleepless night had led me here. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of water, of earth, of beginnings. And in that moment, I understood the final truth. Loyalty had been my strength. Betrayal had been my teacher. And justice, patience, and strategy had been my sword. I smiled softly, almost imperceptibly, as I stepped forward, leaving shadows behind and embracing the light. Because the deadliest revenge isn't fury, it's indifference. And walking away with my soul intact was the sweetest justice of all.